Is Christine, moderator from the Project Avalon Forum, which many of you listening to by this time will know that I'm no longer a moderator. I find it very interesting to take a few steps back in time and to see how much can change in such a abrupt way. I hope that everyone that listens to this will have a great benefit from it. It was recorded with a lot of heart, a lot of feeling, and a lot of truth. And just want to also state for myself that there is no ill will, nothing other than what remains in me at this moment is to speak the truth, to follow the truth no matter where it leads us. And so here I am speaking the second part of an interview now with Goode, ETXSG, who was a member of the Project Avalon Forum and at the current time is no longer such. Life moves on. Doors close and doors open. And I think it is with a great deal of heart, feeling, love, honor that we all move forward through this time. Thank you. All right, so this is Christine, moderator at the Project Avalon Forum, and today I have the honor and the pleasure of speaking with the forum member that is known as Goode, ETXSG. Many of you are very aware of his, as the first part of an audio release we did, I believe it was at the end of September, October?
Yeah, around the September 23rd, and then again on October 3rd, I believe.
Okay, so since that time, a lot of things have been happening, I would suggest, in Goode's world. I'm going to refer to him as Jim during this interview today because we know each other and it's an easy, informal name for me to use. That way I won't be using his real name, it's his alias. I know there's a lot of things that we may be speaking about today, Jim. We had a little talk the other day, and I certainly know since we released that audio, it has brought about pretty much an avalanche or a tsunami of responses from people out there. Forum members, other people are contacting you. I've been contacted. A lot of healing work is going on. And it's just been hard to keep up with it. I mean, I haven't even myself been able to keep up with all your postings, so I apologize for that. I've read a great deal of it, but certainly not all of it. I also want to thank you really from a very deep place of gratitude for your grace and your manner and how you've been answering the folks' questions. You're certainly know how sensitive all of these issues are and also how broad and vast the subject matter is that we're talking about. So I just, hats off to you, and I'll take hats off for Bill Ryan too, as I know he's been very pleased with the way both threads have been rolling out for everyone. It's pretty amazing to see such a great amount of intelligence and civility being exercised on the forum. So thank you, Jim.
I've done the best I can. I've really, of course, when we first did the first recording of the conversation, it was in a very, it was done in a kind of very relaxed format. My wife was in the background. My nearly 4-year-old son was there, and I was talking for the first time out loud on a lot of stuff.
Right.
That some of the stuff, a good deal of the stuff she had heard before, but I was talking. I was a little hesitant because she was walking around, and I was like, okay, how is she going to react to some of this stuff? Mm-hmm. But after Christine leaves, I'm going to have a lot of questions.
Right.
So I was on a number of levels. I was a little nervous. It was the first time since the entity detachment situation that I was pretty much clear and able to talk about it without locking up.
Right, yes.
And you can attest to that. We had tried to talk about it before, and I had gotten so tongue-tied, and I was unable to talk about it to where I actually had to leave the room.
Right, yeah. Maybe it would be good just to have, for the audio purpose this time, just a little background that first audio wasn't meant for publication, and both of us, Jim and I, knew about that. It actually was, I would say, at the end of 2 years of you and I getting to know each other and developing a relationship, trust, sharing our own insights. And the thing I really want to note here, because we will probably get into it in this talk a bit, is that it became aware to me from being on the forum and reading different people's posts, but especially reading your posts, that I was sharing a lot of your same perceptual data. And so I started to share with you some of the remote viewing data I was getting, which was very surprising for me because it sort of started coming to me out of the blue. It wasn't something I was trained in. And you would start verifying it for me. And that was so valuable that it became for me a part of what I believe is what we're doing on the forum, is sharing our information in a free way. And I've seen, and I especially see it with the release of the last audio, was that you're overcoming the triggers, the implants, the overlays, the fear, all the things that you experienced from early childhood has allowed many others to open up and start to share their experiences. So I think this is going to be a bit of a continuation of that. Since then, I've also, like you, have had contact with people all over who are feeling for the first time they can speak. And so I just want to honor that as part of what we're doing, not just having this talk today, Jim, but also on the Project Avalon forum. There's a bridge here, and I just want to make note of it, and then I'll hand it over to you. There seems to be a bridging happening between what are all of these human agendas, extraterrestrial agendas, AI agendas, our mythologies, we could name it, all the symbologies under which we're operating, all of the things that keep being brought up to the surface. And then there's the act or the understanding of our real spiritual nature. We could call it our quantum beingness, or we could call it how we are as beings of resonance. And that was, for me, with you, was probably the most important part of feeling the connection, was understanding that you also have not only the experiential data, but you also have a broader picture of who we are as spiritual beings. So that's the broad brush context of perhaps what this conversation or this interview will be geared or progressing towards. Now, I'd like you to just say whatever it is that you might want to talk about to begin with. And just maybe leading in a little bit, a lot of people have asked about, because I made that comment, a lot of miracles happened in your life after publishing. And you've spoken on the forum about the entity detachments, but that wasn't included in our first audio, and I would wonder if you'd like to start there.
Okay. Yeah. I was a little disappointed that the entity attachment part was not in the last conversation that was released. Just because it's such a very important part of the process of what it is to be to be released from all of the programming and the mind control and the entities are a lot of the times involved in, along with this technology, they're the gatekeepers. And after I started talking openly on the forum about it, in detail about the actual entity that I remote viewed in my light body, and then after I listened to Eve Lorgan, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and James Bartley in an interview about entity attachments. I remembered a remote viewing that I'd done a year and a half earlier where I saw this being in my light body, and it made me forget it. And I was able to use some different tactics to will it out of my being. And that was in between two of our conversations that this happened.
Right.
And it went from me locking up and not being able to have conversations about certain things to being able to have a full conversation and being able, I could always access these memories, but I could not verbalize them.
Right.
And when I started writing about this on the forum, I was unprepared for the tsunami of emails and personal mails through Avalon that I received, and I was really caught off guard. How many people are dealing with this kind of thing? And there's been some that I've handled on my own, that I've been working with on my own, because people that have been through this are a very skittish bunch. They have major trust issues.
Of course.
And with me knowing what I've been through, they have a little bit of a trust, but a camaraderie, or I've been through the same thing. So they will feel me out, see if I'm, kind of vet me to see if I'm, full of crap. And once, I kind of vet them too. And once we fill each other out, then we'll have a conversation. And, there's been people that I send to the way of the Avalon Healing Group. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I don't think hardly anyone knows. People just see Avalon Forum and think it's just some forum where people go when they're bored to sit and hack around on the computer and talk about aliens and UFOs. Mm-hmm. They don't realize in the background all the resources that Avalon has. They have all different types of energetic healers, remote viewers, counselors for people that have been through ritual abuse, MILAB'S, and alien abduction, all these different types of things.
Right.
And I've referred people through you to the healing group, and there's always a place for people to find healing at Avalon that I've found.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I just underline that just to really put it forward what it is. It's all grassroots too. Yes. Even though some people are very professional, we have a lot of professional healers and researchers on the forum. But
they remain very anonymous.
Yes, they do.
In the forum, but a lot of this stuff goes on in the background. Yes. So people that are openly in the forum do not realize what all goes on behind the scenes.
No.
And I've gotten a little peek at it just from, recently, referring some people that are seriously in pain, under spiritual attack or under entity attack, all other different types of things. And I've seen the resources y'all have to Marshall. And, people need to know that there's more to Avalon than just some researchers or just a bunch of moderators sitting around with nothing else to do, watching over a forum.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the healers group is actually called Avalon 24/7. I think that's pretty adequate name. Right. Okay.
And it's 24/7 is exactly right.
Yeah.
I think you are all over the globe, aren't you?
Oh yeah, all over the globe, and a lot of us realize that even in our sleep we're actually being accessed and working. So. It's a fabulous activity. I'll probably do something a little later. I'll do my own little talk about that in the next week or so. So thanks for mentioning it. And I just
I know this is about my material, but I can't talk about the entity attachments and some of my material without mentioning that.
Sure.
Because I've been so inundated and overwhelmed with insiders and people that have been coming to me that I've had to offload and come to y'all.
Yeah, well,
And
it's really
there's been I've had some major insiders.
Sure.
One in particular that was active in one of the secret space programs that very few know about, called the Dark Fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And very few have inside information, and I was excited about it. And for a short time, someone that will remain nameless had released my full name out in public, and it caused this person to clamp up and remove themselves, and I haven't been able to talk to them again, and I was getting some really good information from them.
Right.
It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, so let's just underline that point here is that, the information that you're sharing and a lot of the people that are talking, and it is literally mind-blowing. This is not, what's happening right now. Those that are sharing privately and will feasibly share publicly at some point, the information is staggering in its implication. And I just, if you don't mind, just to underline, going back to the incident where the entities were detached from you, I think it might be nice if you just give a description of how that was accomplished. Because there's a lot of people sitting out there right now listening and wanting to know. And then number two, I think there's something that happened outside of your expectations. I think you were wired, let's say, to think that if you spoke, really bad things would happen, and if, in your estimation, the opposite has taken place.
Yeah, I was programmed with different kinds of triggers. Different people are programmed with different kinds of triggers. That sometimes they don't know why, but they'll. Some things made me. For some reason, I was just beyond my personality. I was just angry, making me angry, react angrily. And I have 2 children and a wife, and I'm a real laid back kind of guy, and it was just not my personality. And I would see certain materials online or that kind of thing, and there's different triggers, and people don't realize that people can come onto a forum, and it may look like they're on there to give a narrative that looks pretty interesting, but they're giving triggers on purpose, and it can cause people that are programmed with triggers, different kinds of triggers, to hurt themselves, hurt their family, to go as far as even murder or suicide, and or emotionally abuse people. There's a lot of different things, and I felt that if I were to push the boundaries, something like that was possible. I had been warned off about some of the stuff I had spoken about very vaguely in some of my threads over the last few years, to stop being so open. And so, I was nervous about that. So about now it's been close to 2 years ago, I had this weird urge to remote view my light body. So I sat down and I started remote viewing my light body. And because of the things I've been through, my light body is quite a bit further out than my physical body. And so I started from the bottom top, and I started moving, and I saw all these different orbs just at different frequencies resonating, different colors, usually in the higher, out of the Roy G. Biv spectrum, and the green, blue, indigo, violet color spectrum. And the overall background field color was kind of a yellowish color that I was in. And so I was moving throughout the spheres, moving my way up, and I got about 3/4 of the way up, and I saw a red sphere, smaller than the others, and it wasn't vibrating. It was just out of place, sitting there. And I immediately, with my mind, I moved to it, and I looked at it. And I was like, what is this? And in my mind, I said, go transparent, what's inside? And about a 90-degree arc of a sphere, if you can picture that, went translucent. And sitting inside of it was a being. And I was shocked, and it was probably twice as shocked as I was. And it looked like kind of like a hunchbacked frog. But instead of a frog that's long ways, it was kind of like if you took a frog and squished it and made it perpendicular up and down. And we had a short dialogue. It was like, it was wanting to know how I knew about it. And you're not supposed to know about me. And I was asking, how long have you been here? And it was telling me, I've always been here. I've been here forever, your whole life. And he told me, you're mine. You belong to me. There was a long dialogue that I don't remember all of, but it told me, it said, you will forget me. And it held its long, skinny, looked like a dried up, dead frog's arm. It held it up and it said, you will forget me. And I came out of the session, I told my wife, and back then, she, bless her heart, she's gone through a lot of awakening since then. She looked at me and was concerned. She was, that's really weird, honey. And she goes, I wouldn't tell too many people about that. And I was like, oh, I won't. And then I was immediately sorry that I told her. I was like, I shouldn't have said anything. And within 3 days, both of us totally forgot about it.
Right. And
it had told me also in there that I asked who it was, and he told me he was the gatekeeper.
Okay. Wow.
And after I watched, there was one of the members, I believe Sydney or someone, posted a video, and there were a whole bunch of videos about MILAB'S and different stuff, but for some reason this one stuck out. So I played it, and about 3/4 of the way through, it started talking about entity attachments. And all of a sudden, boom, I pictured that entity sitting in its sphere, and it looked like it was sitting inside of almost like it was a little self-contained spaceship sphere. And I felt it cringe as I remembered it. And then I remembered it, and I was like, holy crap. And then I remembered it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this sucker. And it was talking about, you can will it out of your life with your free will. So I started doing that. I started saying, I will you out of my life. I want you out of my life. And it was saying, it's not going to be that easy. You belong to me. And I kept doing that. And then I felt that it was gone.
Right.
But I still didn't feel right. And for the next couple of nights, it was coming in my dreams and tormenting me and attacking me in my dreams. And I told Stacy about it. And this is going to be a part that a lot of people are going to have a problem with. And I know there's a lot of people that have their own beliefs and ideas about the name or the entity that was or was not Jesus. So I'm not going to get into any ideology of it.
I understand.
But she said, "Did you think about evoking the name Jesus?" And I said, "Well, no, I did not think of that." And she said, "Well, you should try that." And I had heard in some of the videos about MILAB'S that people had done that and it had worked. And in some instances, it had not worked, and stuff. So I tried. So the next night, I was attacked all night. And in the early mornings, I kind of came in out of a lucid dream and woke up after I was being attacked. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I said, in the name of Jesus, I banish all entities that are attached to my body, mind, and spirit. I close all portals or entrances into or out of my body-mind complex. I banish them from my family, the realm of my family, and from my home. And I started repeating it over and over with my eyes closed, and immediately started seeing all of these beings and groups of like 6 to 12 shooting from my head and chest, just above. And so I kept saying it over and over. And then I opened my eyes, and I could still see them.
Wow.
And people have discussed with me what they were. People have said those sound like the jinn or whatever, but they had the head and shoulder outline of a human being, and like the arms, and then like black flames and smoke coming off the bottom part of them. And they were shrieking and screaming in terror and anger, and they were flying off of me. And groups of about a dozen, and like just tons and tons of them shot off of me. And after that happened, I got up, and I felt a freedom like I've never felt before. My wife and kids were like, "There's something different about you. You're totally different." I'd been diagnosed with PTSD. I didn't have to take most of the PTSD medicines, except for a little bit of medicine for anxiety. And our dog that always kept its distance from me now just will not leave me alone. It's all over me. And it's just the weirdest thing. And then the next time you came over, I think you tried one more time. You were very gently trying to talk about things. And I just opened up, and boom, it was like diarrhea of the mouth. It just came out.
Yeah. Oh, I can attest to the change in the energy field for sure.
Yeah, and it was like, we were like talking for like, I think 30 minutes, and I was like, "Do you realize like the difference?" And you were like, "Yeah." You're like, "No, I realize it."
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time we had gotten maybe 10 or 15 minutes into trying to talk about some of this stuff, I totally locked up, could not talk about it. Felt total fear, anxiety, pain, flashbacks of certain entities, certain things that were done to me. I would get flashbacks that were terrorizing, and it was terrible. And those are all gone. I've been able to talk about it and not have any of those problems since.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think it's really important people hear that, because a lot of people are in the same situation or worse than you have been. And always to know that there is a way out of it. Even if I know for you for a long time, it seemed like you never were going to get free of these things. and they were super suppressive. I mean, not just to you, but your whole family, and it's your great courage, really, for having withstood so much for so long. So, thanks for sharing that. Um, I'm also, as you're speaking, I'm realizing there's something you brought in there, which is about synchronicity.
Yeah.
And would you say that, well, it's always probably been this case for you, but something I'm noticing and is how knowledge is power, or how when we have an expanded knowledge or when we're out from under suppression, how we start to be able to expand. And I've certainly noticed an uptick in synchronicity. Like somehow you just get the information you need. Like you said on the forum, somebody posted something and you went right to it. Like there's something else operating here as more people are speaking, that I just will dub it as synchronicity. Has that been the case for you?
Oh yes, yeah. Without all of the gatekeepers and uh, one of the things that I've talked about is um, human beings, because of all of our genetic manipulation and because of who we are mentally and spiritually, we have a wider spectrum or band of emotions than most of the beings out there. Mm-hmm. And we have also a very extreme potential in our individual and combined consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about, David Wilcock's books, The Source Field. A lot of people have read those. There's other researchers out there that have talked about, how everything around us is vibration. Matter, energy, thought, it is all vibration of a different resonance. And consciousness interacts with those vibrations and can manipulate them. And our mass consciousness is what is creating our shared reality. Mm-hmm. And, the powers that be know this. And this is the root power of their magic. They use television and movies to plant a seed of a negative seed of what they want to happen in the future. And then that becomes a part of our mass consciousness, which is a very powerful tool. Mm-hmm. And then they'll pull another incident, like a false flag or something else, that through fear we will go back to that seed, and our mass consciousness will remember that programming. Mm-hmm. And our mass consciousness will manipulate our shared reality and make it so. So we are the ones that actually end up casting that final spell in their magic and making it happen.
Right. Yeah. I'm so totally with you on my own understanding of that.
And the cabal, the other entities that are around manipulating and watching us, they know our true potential and power. They are purposely dumbing us down about it, keeping us fighting each other, keeping us totally unaware of our true abilities, because they are very afraid of us. Mm-hmm. And they also are indignant towards us because of they see us as a lower life, kind of a low, has been gifted with extreme potentials.
Right.
And a lot of them are trying to splice those extreme potentials into themselves.
Right.
But there is a spiritual component to it that they just do not have that same bandwidth of spiritual component, that it just will never work for them. Mm-hmm. They can get the genetics in there, they can get all the different things that we have, physically, genetically, and all that. But if they don't have the right energetic, light body and energy about them, to where and their ability to have the emotional spectrum that we do, they're not going to have the ability to have the same consciousness abilities that we do.
Right.
Now, there's beings out there that have amazing consciousness and do amazing things, and that are far superior and more advanced than us technologically and spiritually in some ways, but we have the potential to surpass them.
Right. Well, I couldn't agree with you more on what you're talking about here. And the one thing that I've formulated for myself I formulated it out of some experiential data and talking to a lot of other people, is that we have a potential to reach beyond. And it is the pure emotion. I mean, I've become very aware of the pure emotions, not the contrived, manipulated emotions, but the pure feeling nature that we actually do have in our spiritual nature. And there's a place they can't control us anymore, and that is in my mind, or the way I'm seeing things right now, and feeling things, is the door towards our own freedom. Because as much as they map us, data mine us, hack us, there is what I could only call an eternal flame, and it does reach for freedom in a manner that they can't really abuse it. And I feel like that's what's happening in more and more consciousness on the planet right now.
Well, part of what's happened is we've been genetically manipulated on many occasions, and we've been genetically programmed to have a need to worship, and a need to seek someone to follow, a leader. As our consciousness expands, we are breaking through that genetic programming. And our consciousness is breaking through that genetic programming, and we're defeating it. And that's something that they worked really hard to program into us. They wanted us to look up to them, look to them to come save us, to be our saviors, and this and that, and and to dumb us down about our powers to have the ability to manipulate and change our realities ourselves if we just come together.
Right.
And they do not, they're successfully keeping us from coming together over just petty things like the color of our skin. That's just so stupid. I mean, it's the color of the upholstery of our skin. It's like, how stupid can that be? I mean, that's like, you could have 5 couches sitting in the living room, and each one has a different colored upholstery, but they're all the same couch, and people are sitting around arguing over, which is superior. They've managed to segment us and divide us into ideology, racism, and all this, and it's all purposely done to keep us from coming together and realize our true potential and our joint reality, joint consciousness, and this has been done for a long time. I posted a video about our scientists, how way back in the 19th century, they were realizing that when they were observing their experiments,
they realized that the individuals that were observing the experiments were having were affecting the outcome of the experiment just by observing them with their consciousness. And depending on the perception or how the person would think the outcome of the experiment would be, that would affect the outcome of the experiment. And you would think the experiment should be the same every time, the outcome. And this led smarter and smarter people to start understanding about the consciousness, how it affects time, space, and all vibratory matter, energy, and thought. And from there, science diverged into what we have now as mainstream science, which is a very dumbed down science and somewhat of a religion unto itself.
Yes.
And then we have the black ops science, which I got a good baptism into, which is quite a bit different and is based on totally different principles and a whole different type of math system. And I said in the forum that if math is the universal language, then our scientists in the mainstream don't speak the language.
No, they're actually prohibited from speaking that language. So,
yeah, they don't speak the right language because there's been all kinds of flaws found in even Einstein's equations. His theory of relativity, there was a couple equations, they found you just needed to flip over, and that kind of thing. He made some mistakes. And then some new mathematics were born, and I'm no math person, but there's some. I saw people writing out math on boards that it might as well have been hieroglyphics. Right. There were very few numbers involved.
Huh. Yeah, that's another subject actually for another time, is different languages, because I'm actually studying a lot of that right now too. Where, but we could talk about that at another time. And I'm just I'm listening, and it's an interesting phenomenon. It's almost like I'm hearing your words before you say them. And that's just an indicator for me that there's a field of intelligence that's available to us, and it's speaking to us all the time.
We have a joint consciousness.
Yeah,
joint
exactly,
consciousness.
Exactly. And yet,
we're able to tap into it.
Exactly. And that is our those are our, I will say, they're our inherited abilities. They're in all of us. And more people are waking up now and expressing that, or I say more beings are being activated. And so what I'd like to do is get into a little bit of what you've been, to turn on the other side of the consciousness table, as it were, because here you're also talking about the secret space program. You mentioned the Dark Fleet earlier. How does all that tie in, and what are, in your opinion, right now the most important things for us as individual and group consciousness to become aware of, so that we can do this experiment and we can start to change it? Because it is true that our consciousness is actually moving into the realities now and changing them. And I know that's where a lot of people that listen to you and write and ask you questions, they're asking about the AI agenda. We're talking about the black money magic cabal. There's a lot of things I've just written down some notes about, but just putting out a broad-based question to you, or how do you see this right now? What's happening out there in the Galactic Federation and the galactic politics and all of these races? How does that fit into what you just expressed?
Okay, yeah, That's just a small question.
Oh, I know. I only know how to ask small questions. No, I know. You do the best. I mean, obviously, we're talking of something so vast that our human mind is still probably just on the edges of understanding.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that one I can answer in chunks and stages.
okay.
Okay. So yeah, people often ask me, they're like, okay, I see all this information. What am I supposed to do about it? What can I do? People feel so small, or, what am I supposed to do about it? And we've all seen these reports of, there was, I wish I could find it. There was just this one study of a very small, maybe like 1,700 people that did it all at the same time, did prayers and meditation the same time every day for a period of time, and they brought down the overall terrorism and crime on the planet by like 73%.
Yeah. I've read that study. Actually, Greg Braden speaks about it if you want to look it up later. And actually, people are monitoring right now the vibration of the planet with these groups doing meditation. So they're making a science out of it too. They're actually doing scientific studies. Okay. So I can post something when we post this. I'll post something with some information links. Okay.
Yeah, and it's actually somewhere in that huge book of David's source field investigation. Right. It's somewhere in that book mentioned, but it's very, 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 very true. And you can become a part of that. Each of you sitting right there, looking at the computer screen right now, can make a choice. You can decide, I am going to I'll start 10 minutes a day and work my way up 30 minutes a day, and try to get to maybe an hour or 2 hours a day of just doing whatever type of meditation, of whatever religion I am, prayer, of pure, just being pure in that moment of prayer, of meditation, but thinking, meditating, praying for a positive timeline outcome for humanity, and thinking for the end of corruption, and thinking for the end of suffering, and focusing, I should say, instead of thinking, focusing on the end of suffering, pain, and subjugation of all of humanity. If each and every one that listens to this, and you get another person to do that, and we get groups that start doing that, that is going to have a measurable effect.
Sure.
And that there's no need to pick up arms and rush the gates of the nearest establishment. This is going to have more of an effect than that. And this is what you can do.
Right. And the one thing that I add to that is speak your truth, and speak it clearly. Don't be intimidated by it. Inform yourself. Turn off television sets. This all part of it, because we don't have an expanded consciousness by turning a blind eye to what the reality is being practiced on our planet. So I see it as a two-edged activity in a way. That one of the deep contemplation of our real reality, our real nature, which is actually peace-loving, creative beings, and how we affect our planet, and how what you brilliantly spoke of in the beginning of our speaking here is how we are the final piece on creating the reality that we're living in is us. And so pulling off our coats, taking down our false ego identities and the crises that are around us, and rewriting them. And that is within our range of doing.
We
And,
are the tool of the 0.1%.
Mhm.
We are the tool of our own destruction and our own captivity.
Exactly.
You know, they're using our own the power of our own consciousness and the power of our own broad spectrum of emotions. They're using all of those gifts as tools to subjugate us, tools against us.
Yeah.
So we need to step outside and reclaim those gifts and use them as a shield and a sword in a nonviolent way, but in a way of truth and love, and as a way to be truly service to others, and step outside of the system that we're living in, this Babylonian money magic system, to where all we care about is working, paying off debts, keeping up with the Joneses, having that nice car, having that 60-inch TV, watching shows about people that have all that stuff and wanting to be like them. That is all a huge trap. And you step outside of that trap and do what I'm talking about, and you become part of the solution instead of one of the victims.
Right. Or a pawn in the game. I mean, or as so many things, and maybe we can sort of segue into that right now, where we've been exploring, and a lot of information says that many of these superiorly advanced civilizations that have a presence on our planet right now see us as an experiment, the creator, supposed creator gods, where their experiment, or where we can actually speak of those that have come here to harvest us. All of those agendas, how do we actually see them and get free of them? And I know that's where you have a lot of information on that, and I do get very intrigued by what's the shadow government or the secret space program, and all of these things that are operating just below our consciousness.
And let me kind of break some of that down.
Okay.
Now we have there is what we can call the shadow government, or the Five Eyes, the apparatus that is all about keeping control of everything going on down here on Earth, the keeping us, all the different nations in line, the individuals in line, keeping tabs on us, making sure that the financial system is locked down and everyone follows the Babylonian money magic system, money slave system, that keeps them occupied with that system. But above that are these multiple secret Earth governments. And these are more of like your Hydra kind of things. And the Cabal is just like one tentacle of these secret Earth governments. They're more of the Earth part. These secret Earth governments are extremely powerful, and they have their own secret space programs. Or, for instance, one group is entirely, well, and there's most likely two of these are what we're referring to as interplanetary corporate conglomerates. And these would be like all these different defense contracting companies that compete with each other, but people that retire from boards will retire and then go onto this board that is like a super company board that manages this interplanetary super conglomerate, which is its own breakaway civilization. and they own quite a many of these off-world colonies, industrial complexes, mining facilities. Most of the materials that they get for building the different things they build are mined completely off planet. So they're not sucking a whole lot of money off of the earth to go into a lot of these programs. They're the people that are working in or living in these colonies are pretty much slaves. They've been promised, hey, you and your family sign these papers, y'all are going to be shipped to this, and they're shown videos of like these beautiful science fiction kind of things you'll see in the movies. This is what you're going to be living like. You're going to be living like the Jetsons, and you'll be, with your skills, you'll be building this part of a spacecraft, or this part of replicator type things, or this part of something else. There's so many things they build. And you'll be on this colony, on this planet, or moon, or this location. And so they get all these promises, and then so they get their whole family, they're shipped there, and then the reality sets in. They land in pretty much a totalitarian environment where everyone's walking around pale, dreary, unhappy. They're escorted at gunpoint to like an 8x10, 8x8 living quarters for them and their entire family. And then they're given rosters for what them and their entire family will do. And they live there for the rest of their lives. They have arranged marriages for their kids as they grow up. It's not good.
No.
So they're not paid money. You know, they're given a place to, you know, live and food, and they work. And it's horrible. And these people do the labor. And these people mine asteroids and asteroid belts. They mine materials on different planets, and the raw materials are taken to other outposts and facilities where they are turned into usable materials and manufactured, and very little money actually goes into building these different things. So I see a lot of times people talking about how many trillions of dollars are going into certain parts of the space program, and a lot of this is just materials that are mined and retrieved off-world and being built by slave laborers. So,
can I ask a question? Because I don't have it clear. Is this information that you've been given by insiders, or remote viewing, or your own experiences?
my own experiences, when we would, when the research vessel, we would sometimes, the scientists would be needed to be brought to some of these colonies. They were different than any of the other outposts or colonies that we went to. When we arrived, as soon as we arrived, there were 4 to 6 armed guards. They escorted us directly to the point where the technicians were to do their work, and there was no staying overnight. There were never any invitations to tour the facility. We were told not to speak to anyone, and then escorted straight back. And then, this was information I was told about the environment. of the corporate colonies.
Okay.
And I was told that the corporate colonies, the 13 original, they had 13 original colonies and outposts. They wanted to make sure that there was never a revolution or a situation that happened like in the creation of the United States. So it was, from the very beginning, it was a totalitarian, locked down, very oppressive situation.
Okay. Seems to be a repetition in the number 13 important. My other question is why, well, who's doing this? I mean, we were talking about an industrial corporation or complex. And why are they using humans for labor when they probably could be using automated?
They also had clones there.
Okay. Right.
But these were people that were extreme. They had brought in, a lot of them had been there from like 60s, 70s, 80s.
Okay.
Had been brought in and had been there a long time. And their numbers had grown quite a bit just from the population growth. And we had seen obvious clones, people that looked exactly the same, carrying like not really boxes, but crate kind of boxes around. And I don't think there's that many quadruplets or whatever you call them.
Right.
But they were obviously clones. But I think that the human labor, they were easier to control, train using the methods of the quick neurological training, where you set someone in front of those curved screens, give them an injection, and show them a video that's real quick, a whole bunch of information overlaid, going real quick, and it goes into your brain at a very high rate. Gives you, I've had it done to me, it gives you a headache, makes you nauseous, but you take in an incredible amount of information.
Right.
And I'm sure this was used quite a bit on these people. To train them, and probably also to train the clones or whatever.
Right.
But that at that point, that's what these people were doing.
Okay.
Why they weren't using robots, I don't know. But a lot of it could go back to a lot of the their probably fears or being careful of AIs or infiltration of different AI kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, it just comes to my mind as you're speaking that there's certain things that the human body type can do that other types of bodies can't. So, it would make sense that they would actually.
And humans are very, very adaptable, very good engineers. There's a lot of one of the things that the actual Solar Warden is a older secret space program. They're kind of one of the more aging groups out there, technology-wise. They were put out there to pretty much police the solar system for incoming, outgoing visitors. There are literally thousands of different groups that are coming in. We're kind of along a kind of like Silk Road, galactic Silk Road of travelers. And human beings are highly sought after for many, many different reasons. We're a commodity. And the group that I was talking about, and this is going to sound strange, but human beings have become very well known for our engineering and production of advanced technology.
Mm-hmm.
And this corporate group doesn't only produce technology and products for the secret space programs, but they also produce it for off-world groups.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I can follow that, and it's fascinating. And so these groups, and then one question was, are these corporate groups, whatever you want to call them, just call them power brokers for the sake of a word, are they human? Are they extraterrestrial? Are they
They're
dealing?
human.
I'm breaking up.
Yeah, you're breaking up, but yeah, they're human.
Okay, they're human. So they're human, Earth-based.
Yes.
It's a just called a secret space program that is farming and getting resources from off-world, and they're using humans to part of their deal is to use a human to do that.
They're a very opportunistic group.
Mm-hmm.
They keep and save a lot of the most advanced toys for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So they have most of the most advanced toys.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where do you have an idea of who they are? I mean, we talk about, obviously the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Soros of the world, the big money people that are the faces out there. They're all pretty well known. What's behind that?
Those are all the people down here on the. Okay, there's a right now there is what is referred to as a shadow civil war going on.
Okay.
And that's going on amongst some of the secret space program, some of what we call the white hats in the secret space program, and their allied off-world groups that are in league with them think that it is high time that the technologies that have to do with harmonic healing of the human body, free energy, technologies that will help cleanse the earth of certain pollution and damage that's been done,
Mm-hmm.
be released to humanity. The issue is that once this is done, it will nullify and do away with any need for a financial system. There will be no need for the Babylonian money magic slave system. That's a big problem for the. That's what's going on above, and then below we have a major war going on over the global financial system. Mm-hmm. Between the BRICS groups, the Western Cabal, and some other groups, and the different dragon groups, French groups that are all fighting over control of different variations of a global financial system, which will be based on a debt system, which is just going to be another mask of a Babylonian debt slave system. And what it all comes down to is what happens with this shadow civil war, and what happens with this extreme, and they know that there's an extreme awakening happening on the planet among people. Many of them have openly been talking about it, about humanity's awakening at an alarming rate. A lot of them think that we're awakening too late, but it's not. As we're awakening, many of us are wondering, what do we do with this awakening? Mm-hmm. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about start focusing your intent, focusing your consciousness on a joint changed reality to where these negative forces have no place in this new reality that we're focusing on.
Well, let's just break for a second here. There's some questions I want to ask you regarding your own visions, because what I'm talking about is imagery and visionary qualities that we have. But before we get into that, because that may be the question for the end of this particular part, of course, anything you want to speak of too, please bring it up. The one thing that we're always been looking at, all of us that are doing this work, is the artificial intelligence. And I've had my own run-ins with them. I've had my own understandings of it. It's as varied as there are conscious levels. I know you have a lot of experience and you've been trained to be looking for those. They come in any manner of things. I mean, we could talk about the bots. We could talk about the scuttlers that come through computers. We can talk about embedded thoughts. We can talk about constructed paradigms or constructed holographs that people fall into. I mean, there's a huge, huge thing, but in general, we've also are talking about, I guess, a lot of the chemtrailing and the nanotechnologies and the co-opting of the human body so that these artificial intelligences can run us. All of that comes under that category. And I think it's important to address it from your perspective, the dangers, and also how to recognize it. And then I'll have another little question along that line.
Okay. Yeah, I have absolutely no information or knowledge about chemtrails other than I have seen them myself. And what I've read online. So I've seen all different types of ideas put forth about them. So I have nothing to offer there that would be other than speculation. I want to stay away from speculation.
Great, that's perfect.
The AI thing has really been focused on a lot from my last talk. It was something that was clearly a very it was something that was very concerning to the off-world groups and to the various programs. You were always screened. You would go through questioning to, ask if you. I don't remember all the different questions. They would ask you questions. Some of them would be innocuous questions that had nothing to do with it, and some of them would be keyed-in questions. But things like, have you seen shadows in the sight of your vision peripherally? That could or could not have had something to do directly with the AIs. It may have been one of the tests or ambiguous questions, but there was a list of questions that they would always ask you. But one of them was, have you seen, the spider kind of things? If you see the spider kinds of things, that isn't them trying to infect you. That means you are infected. You have been infected. So they would ask you all these different things. Have you when are you often even though you're wearing rubber shoes or in an electrostatic on an ESD floor?
Consciously walking the path to fourth density. This is what ascension is all about. Mike Wachowski is going to read the Law of One parts.
So a question was asked by Don Elkins to Ra. Could you define the word density as we have been using it to give us a little bit greater idea of what this is meaning? And Ra says, the term density is what you would call a mathematical one. The closest analogy is that of music, whereby after 7 notes on your type of scale, if you will, the 8th note begins a new octave. Within your great octave of existence, which we share with you, there are 7 octaves or densities. Within each density, there are 7 subdensities. Within each subdensity, 7 sub-subdensities, and so on infinitely. So the interesting point I think about this is it's kind of like a geometry, where if you imagine an 8-sided shape, that's how consciousness flows as it progresses into a vertex, a point on that shape. So it's like we have this very mathematical idea to understand why there's a discrete difference in the level of consciousness as how it's separated out in the universe.
Thank you. Now, the way it was explained to me, the difference in density had to do first with consciousness. What would occur is that consciousness would evolve for a being, and then with their once they have more of a connection to their co-creative consciousness, then they begin to change matter, create matter around them. So it's a lot of us, I guess we won't know until it happens when we have the solar event. But it very well could be that we are hit with just a whole new way of thinking, a huge consciousness shift.
Okay, so this is a question about 3rd and 4th density. They wanted a description of the conditions in 4th density, and Ra decided to explain this in terms of both what is 4th density and what is not 4th density, because they ask us to consider that there are no words for positively describing 4th density. It's not very easy for us to understand. We can only explain what it is and explain what it is not and approximate what it is. Beyond 4th density, our ability grows more limited still until we become without words for explaining. They say that which 4th density is not, it is not of words unless chosen. It is not of heavy chemical vehicles for body complex activities. It is not of disharmony within the self. It is not of disharmony within peoples. It is not within the limits of possibility to cause disharmony in any way. Approximations of positive statements. It is a plane of a type of bipedal vehicle which is much denser and more full of life. It is a plane wherein one is aware of the thoughts of other selves. It is a plane where one is aware of the vibrations of other selves. It is a plane of compassion and understanding of the sorrows of 3rd density. It is a plane striving towards wisdom or light. It is a plane wherein individual differences are pronounced, although automatically harmonized by group consensus.
So we're on the precipice right now of becoming 4th density beings. What we have to do is consciously take the next step, or the next several steps, of trying to raise our consciousness, becoming more service to others, so that we will be diverted to a more positive timeline, to where some of the things we're going to speak about tonight, if we're on the positive timeline, we won't even have to worry about witnessing.
One other thing about this slide is that even though right now it looks like we're a long ways away from not causing disharmony in any way, there is a transition period that they describe in the Law of One. So even though there might be a harvest event, there is a transition, and it could be a while before all the consciousness remnants of 3rd density finally transition fully to 4th density.
Why are we transitioning densities right now? What is so special about this time?
Okay, so why are we transitioning? Let's see, this was a question, Don saying, the way I understand the process of evolution is that population has a certain amount of time to progress. This is generally divided in 25,000-year cycles. This is what Ra had explained previously. There's 3 groups of, there's 25,000-year cycles, and then 3 of them put together in a 75,000-year major cycle. So Dunn is asking what caused this situation to come about? What set this up to begin with? And Ra says, visualize, if you will, the particular energy which outward flowing and inward coagulating formed the tiny realm of the creation governed by your council of Saturn, continue seeing the rhythm of this process. The living flow creates a rhythm which is as inevitable as one of your timepieces. Each of your planetary entities began the first cycle when the energy nexus was able in that environment to support such mind-body experiences. Thus, each of your planetary entities is on a different cyclical schedule, as you might call it. The timing of these cycles is a measurement equal to a portion of intelligent energy. The intelligent energy offers a type of clock. The cycles move as precisely as a clock strikes your hour. Thus, the gateway from intelligent energy to intelligent infinity opens regardless of the circumstance on the striking of the hour.
Now, what's interesting is recently Tier communicated to me that they have been buffering these energies from us for a while. That they've had spheres that have been present since the 30s, but they came in earnest around the end of 2011. As a collective, we have been so far away from where we needed to be able to handle these cosmic energies that they had to buffer the energies, or we just would have destroyed ourselves. Now, what is occurring right now is that these spheres are becoming almost non-existent. They're barely buffering any energy at all now. And Tier said recently that these spheres are about to completely disappear from our reality, and we will, I guess that means we are deemed acclimated enough to deal with the full onset of these energies. And he further described to me, and I hadn't heard about a larger cataclysm that occurred a long time ago, but apparently there was a huge stellar cataclysm, multiple stellar cataclysm that occurred in the sector of the galaxy that we're in. It was a very large cataclysm that happened early in the development or the formation of the galaxy, and that we have been in that zone for thousands of years, and we're about to come out of that zone into an area to where the cosmic radiation in the form of gases and the form of actual like photons we'll be moving into the full brunt of those energies, and it is those energies that are going to give us a consciousness boost, which is going to lead to this ascension. What are some changes we can expect in this transition?
Corey and I spent a little time looking through different quotes, and we thought this was a good one to share, because Carla basically asked a very similar question. How may I best revitalize myself, not only now, but in the future? And this information they gave, or these recommendations, were specific to Carla Ruckert, but I think for a lot of us they apply. So they said, this instrument is aware, meaning Carla Ruckert, who's channeling, that's why they call her the instrument, is aware of the basic, Carla is aware of the basic needs of its constitution, her constitution, those being meditation, acceptance of limitations, experiences of joy through association with others, and joy with the beauty as of the singing. She frequently sang at her church. And the exercising, actual physical exercise with great contact whenever possible with the life forces of second density. Oh, they describe physical exercising separately. This is the idea of actually hanging out with nature when they say second density, especially those of trees. This entity also needing to be aware of the moderate but steady intake of food, especially exercise being suggested at a fairly early portion of the day. This is physical exercise. For a fairly early portion of the day, and at a later portion of the day before the resting. So they say 2 periods of physical exercise in the day. Hang out with nature, be careful what you eat, and do what makes you happy.
Basically sounds like maintaining a balance with your mind-body-spirit complex. You know, the Blue Avians delivered the message about a high vibratory diet, which most of us have been on here recently. And it's very important to think of your body. A lot of us are thinking about evolving out of a body or getting away from a body. But for right now, we have to maintain the body. And if we maintain it in a high vibratory way, it's going to be a good vehicle for a high vibratory consciousness. Now, of course, it also basically directs you to do the inward work, to forgive yourself, to forgive others, and to, I guess, to stop the wheel of karma, which has been running over most of us, most of our lives. So I've been trying to do most of these things, but recently I realized on the trip that there was one thing that I had left out of all of these, and it had to do, especially if those are the trees. That was in Yosemite. What types of physical changes may occur during this transition?
The question was about the period of the increase in vibration, which represents the transition period. And Ra says that the first harbingers of this were approximately 45 years ago. The energy is vibrating more intensely through the 40-year period preceding the final movement of vibratory matter through the quantum leap, which represented the time after 1980. So they're saying it began 45 years before 1981 when this was channeled, and it increasing in the 40-year period preceding basically when we're at now, and up into what they're calling a quantum leap, as you would call it.
That would put it at about 1940, and the information I received from Thierry was around 1930 that it started, so that coincides pretty well.
Okay, back on. The question, let's see, this is a separate one. Don was asking, did the ending of the first major cycle have something to do with the destruction of Lemuria? So basically, people have heard of Lemuria generally as this other continent off the west coast, and they're saying, did this destruction just happen to occur at the end of the cycle, or was there some other reason? And Ra says that at the end of a cycle, there is a confluence of energies. This encouraged what was already an inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surfaces of your planetary sphere. So they're saying the continents moved around at the end of the cycle.
Thank you. Now, in the first section here, the vibratory matter shall go through a quantum leap. I believe the first quantum leap that's going to occur is a leap of consciousness. And as that occurs, and as we learn to wield that new control over our consciousness, we're going to have more and more control over matter. Now I was told also recently by Thierry that there are going, as a part of these cosmic changes in the final shifting that the Earth is doing into fourth density, that there are going to be what we would consider cataclysms. From our perspective, things that are not good, tsunamis, earthquakes, rising and lowering of continents. But Thierry said that it was very important that while we witness these things, that we do not feed it fear, because these are basically just transitional birth pains, and we're having to go through it along with Gaia. If we feed it fear, then it's going to cause our co-creative consciousness to guide us into a less than optimal temporal reality. So when we start seeing these types of things, we need to really begin to meditate on a positive outcome, because we're going to be very catalyzed during that time period. And of course, there is the chance that the way this Mandela effect is playing into the whole process, that we could bifurcate into another timeline, and those of us who are doing the work will not experience any of the negative stuff. I guess a lot of us are wondering, what can we do to help each other transition through this? I believe a lot of us know certain individuals, even though we don't want to judge, that we look at and we're just like, they're just not going to make it this cycle. And we're seeing a lot of that. You know, we see these energies are causing a lot of light workers to become more blissed out and kind of detached from reality. And we're having more of the negative types of people who are becoming more so. And they're focusing on all of the negativity, and that's all that they know how to recycle.
Okay, so this was a rather long answer here, and I could start out with the first paragraph if that makes sense. The gist of this, the question was, is it possible to help an entity reach fourth density level in these last days? And Ross says, it is impossible to help another being directly. It is only possible to make catalyst available in whatever form. And that can mean a lot of things, but they say the most important form being the radiation of realization of oneness with the Creator from the self. Less important being information such as we share with you. So they're saying it's more important to radiate, in some sense, love and light of the Creator rather than simply try to teach.
And that may involve putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations to be a tool or a catalyst. A lot of times we will be a catalyst through an example or just a mission that we have in a person's life, whether it be a long mission or a very brief one.
They say, we ourselves do not feel an urgency for this information to be widely disseminated. It is enough that we have made it available to 3, 4, or 5. This is extremely ample reward, for if just one of these obtains fourth density understanding due to the catalyst, then we have fulfilled the law of one in the distortion of service. We encourage a dispassionate attempt to share information without concern for numbers or quick growth among others. That you attempt to make this information available is, in your term, your service. The attempt, if it reaches one, reaches all. We cannot offer shortcuts to enlightenment. Enlightenment is of the moment, is an opening to intelligent infinity. It can only be accomplished by the self for the self. Another self cannot teach enlightenment, but only teach information, inspiration, or a sharing of love, of mystery, of the unknown that makes the other self reach out and begin the seeking process that ends in a moment. But who can know when an entity will open the gate to the present?
So being service to others is not an easy thing. A lot of times we're going to be drawn in to be a catalyst in the lives of those that we would like to drag kicking and screaming into understanding what is going on here with this consciousness shift. There are no shortcuts to enlightenment. We all have to go through our karmic process. And the last couple of years, Kari stated that what they have put me through was a karmic quick burn. And it's a very painful process, but one that it's a process that I think many of us are being forced to go through. Many of us are seeing a lot of things that we've tried to bury popping back up quite a bit in life. So what types of examples do we have of what fourth density living is like? Well, the Anshar, they're a fourth density species. Actually, most recently, they disclosed that they are us from the future. They are us after we ascend, after we build quite a long history in that ascension. They had detected what was similar to the Mandela effect, and they traced it back, and they traced it back to our time period, and then they traced an earlier linchpin type event that happened 17 million years ago, or nearly 17 million years ago. They sent a very small group of their people back to that time period to maintain the timeline and to make sure that their reality was not, did not disappear. Now what occurred is 17 million years ago, when this small group moved back in time, they began a society, and that society grew and grew until there are millions of them. They maintain their numbers, but they're in the millions. And they are living a fourth density existence below our feet. And they are trying to coach us and help us reach where we need to be because we are them in the past. Who is Kari? Well, most recently, we discussed that she comes from the house of Ka. She has me refer to her as Ari. And I kept that quiet for quite a period because she insists that you call her Ari. And people will come to me and tell me they had a special message for me or this or that. I wanted to know, I have a way of knowing that, they were actually in contact. She said that at a very young age, she chose to be set aside from the rest of her fourth density group. She was set aside to be a priestess, set aside to be holy. When I did the mind meld with her, I immediately realized that she was over 130 years old. And, she looked like she was in her mid-20s. She will basically teleport me down to their location in the Central South America area where they are underground. But what she does most of the time is she teleports me to an area that I guess David Wilcock coined the construct, kind of like the Matrix. And it's pretty similar. It's an area that we are co-creating together. We are co-creating that experience together. And we can do all kinds of interesting things in exchanging information in that environment. As I stated, the Anshar claim to be our future fourth density selves. Not only are they, but several of the other groups that represent the different races of Earth. They are, most of them are from the future, and they've come back to maintain timelines as well. How do the Anshar live a 4D existence while we're living on Earth that is transitional right now? Well, they have a series of massive caverns. The main one, which is the one I saw, was about the size of Texas. That's how it was related to me. And there weren't as many pillars as in this depiction here, but there were massive pillars, just miles and miles around, that came up from the floor, went all the way up to the ceiling, parts of the ceiling. And there was a fine mist up in all of the different crevices in the ceiling of this cavern. And they were kind of like clouds, but they weren't holding together like clouds. It was more like a mist. And in the pillars, they had like condos built in all the way up and down. This is a representation. We're going to make it more accurate than this, but this is one that I believe, Renee, you put this together? Yeah, Renee did this. Yes. When Kari showed me the city, when we walked out of this cave door entrance and we came around and I saw how big this cavern was and how huge the city was. It was a city, but they were kind of in clusters. There were various types of craft flying around. There were egg-shaped, cigar, and saucer-shaped. Now, one of the things I realized after being on a few of their craft was that these craft are powered and controlled by the consciousness of those flying it, the fourth density people flying it. It's something I don't know if we would ever be able to fly their vessels. There were a lot of domes that seemed to be lit from the inside, or the skin of the dome was lit, and they looked like the size of stadiums, though I did not get an explanation of what they were. And then there were areas in the sides of the cavern that looked like they had just dematerialized to make buildings, ledges, balconies. And the stone that was removed somehow was, they created these buildings made of the rock. It was almost like they liquefied the rock and put it in a mold. And there were no bricks, there were no seams, and these were very tall buildings that had glass, what looked like glass windows. I guess, has just about everyone heard about the mind meld with Kari? Okay. When I was having our third density or transitional consciousnesses have, it's impossible for us to understand some of the concepts that these higher density beings pass on to us. A lot of times they'll try to pass on a concept to me. I will spend 2 or 3 days not speaking to hardly anyone, staring at the wall, trying to contemplate it and figure out how to mold it into my way of thinking. What has helped that was that Kari wanted to do what basically is a mind meld, a Vulcan mind meld. She first asked me if I wanted to have a drink while we were in my first visit down in the area where all of the priests and priestesses reside. They don't reside in the cities. She turned around and had a glass of this thick amber liquid, and she asked me if I would drink it, and I asked her what it was, and she called it the elixir of Isis. And I asked her what it was made from, and she said it was made from a rare flower that grew down underground. I refused to take it. This was my first visit. I was still kind of testing the spirits, as I say. She drank some of it, and immediately she seemed more relaxed. Her demeanor changed. Now, when she leaned down in front of me, and on both of her knees, she put her wrists like this and her hands up and motioned for me to come in and do the same. And I did, and when our hands joined, I felt, it's kind of like being pulled out of a soggy, cold wetsuit, out of my meat suit. I was pulled out, and in between her and I, we were joint, we were together. I had no real perception of myself, or I couldn't tell where she ended and I began. And immediately, she was very advanced psychically. She immediately took over and started taking me through somewhat of a life review. And she was gaining information from that review. But as she was doing so, I was able to see little bits and pieces of her life growing up. But I was not able or prepared to at the time. I did not know what was about to happen to hone in and look at those deeper. She was able to access all of my information and download it to a point where she has access at all times. And it was such a profound emotional experience and a bonding experience between her and I. She said that because of that experience, no matter what happens on the surface of the earth, she would be looking in on me for the rest of my life. She would have no choice. We had sort of, become one. Thanks. So, how do the Anshar eat? How do they live? Do you eat when you're fourth density? Well, apparently, at least for a while, you do. They have long since moved away from consuming animals. That they did that before their transition. So what they do is they have these huge gardens that they use to raise fruits and vegetables. When she took me to the gardens and we walked up to the ledge, I was surprised. As I was walking closer and closer to the ledge, I experienced a very similar feeling at the Grand Canyon. As you walk up to the edge and everything opens up below you. As I walked up, over the ledge, I could see all the different crops that they had. And she told me that the substrate that they grow in are a high vibratory certain type of rock and crushed crystals. And that they go through a process of re-energizing the crystals every once in a while as they're recycling everything. Everything is recycled. And there was the light that was provided for these plants was done, believe it or not, from sound. They created a sound wave that produced light. So there were no light fixtures anywhere, and there were no shadows. The light was uniform. Now, apparently they also preserved animals that we've been assuming were from the past because they were just so different looking. But I wonder now if these are animals that they brought from the future, from their timeline. They were very prehistoric looking, and more than likely this became sort of a nature reserve to where they would pull species that were becoming extinct over a long period of time. In the very middle of this area was a large plasma ball that looked like it was basically mimicking the sun. It was floating in between the ceiling and the tip of an obelisk that looked very weathered, very old. Pieces of it were chipped away. It looked like water erosion had occurred as well. And there were thicker, misty clouds up at the top of the cave. And it was kind of like a misty rain that would come down. Now, what was weird is when I explained this to David Wilcock when we were preparing to shoot Cosmic Disclosure, his eyes got quarter-sized, and he went and he grabbed his new book cover out of his bag. And we looked at the book cover, and if you see, there's like a star at the tip of it, and then there's Saturn in the background, which a weird thing. If you remember in the first slide about the Anshar, they had a pendant that was Saturn, and they had a jewel in different positions inside the pendant to depict what group they were and where they were based on the Earth. But yeah, David was really taken back when I described this right after he had just received his new book cover design. Now, I was brought to the library area, and in the library, not only when we walked through the library, we started off, we saw scrolls and tablets. It moved into bound books, and then it looked like completely modern books with ISBN numbers, like they had ordered it off of Amazon.com. I don't know how they received the delivery, but they had some very new books that they were keeping for reference. On the bottom layer, I was taken to this huge chamber. It looked like a pressurized chamber, and in it, at the bottom, was laying one of the crystals that was very similar to a crystal I had seen when I was around 10 years old, when I was being trained in the programs, and they brought my class down to a crystal cavern to have us interface with, basically like do a mind meld with the crystals. And afterwards, we were successful. We connected with the crystals and downloaded some information, but then we were taken, the information was removed from us, and then we were blank slated. So we were basically used like a USB drive to get the information from the crystals. Now also, when I was in the mind meld with Kari, I saw an incident to where a young child that she was friends with had been killed by a raptor. And raptors are like these saurian bird type mixes that are they're holdouts from the dinosaur era. And these beings had taken over one of these major crystal caverns that they wanted access, that the Anshar wanted access to. There were repositories of information, and the Anshar had not had access in quite some time to this crystal cavern. But they did have a crystal from the cavern that was taken over, and it apparently they were trying to grow it in this chamber. How are the Anshar assisting us in this transition right now? Well, they've made it clear that they're no longer going to abide by the Mohammed Accords. The negative groups that they were supposed to get together with to end these accords would not meet with them. So 4 different groups decided that on their own they were going to begin the process of making contact with humanity and assisting us. And they had to do this within the realms of cosmic law. To do so, they first are going to start communicating with us when we're in states of meditation or sleep. And they plan on doing quite a bit of work on us when we're in those states until they get us acclimated to a point to where we are ready for one-on-one contact with them entering our homes and having conversations with us. And they said that this would begin to occur with individuals as well as, 1, 2, 3 people. They will not appear on television. They're going to appear to people that are ready, that have been doing the work to help become a catalyst for this consciousness renaissance that we need to kick into. And the Anshar, along with the other groups, have been very worried lately because it does not seem as though we are headed towards the most optimal temporal reality or the reality in which they come from. So they're getting a little bit desperate, and they're really needing all of us to kick in and kick in our co-creative consciousness, and they're willing to back us up. Yeah. So on Monday, when all of us are getting into that special place and beginning our meditation to try to bring the most optimal temporal reality, we're not the only ones vested in that temporal reality. Our future selves are also vested in it, and they are going to lend their extremely powerful co-creative consciousnesses to the same mission that we're lending ours to. 4D living in the cosmos. Who is Ambassador Mika? Ambassador Mika was introduced to me basically by Gonzalez in the presence of Tier. Mika's people come from one of the closest stars to ours in our local star cluster. Their planet is made up mostly of islands, desert islands and tropical islands. And their people recently went through what we are about to go through. They went through a whole process of shaking off the control system. They also had to deal with these reptilian forces, as well as these different genetic farmer groups that were, there was a battle between the negative and the positive groups to have them choose a less than optimal temporal reality. They were able to get past those challenges. They say that their challenges were nowhere near as significant as ours, but they are achievable, and they are as well are reaching out to us in meditative states and in dream states to try to impart information into us, to cause a 100th monkey effect, to give us different methods that they found useful for breaking the control system and entering into this consciousness renaissance. Well, as I stated, Mika's people went through a very similar process, even though the one that we have to go through is much more significant. Our location close to the supergate in our local star cluster, we're right in the middle of our local star cluster, and just outside of our solar system is what they call a supergate that can be used to traverse multiple galaxies and anywhere within our galaxy. It's a very, very coveted gate system, but at the same time, it made us major targets for these 22 different genetic farmer groups because it gave them access to us. And because we're closest to the gate, that's why we have so much genetic diversity as well. Even the animal kingdom, they have brought in different genetics and different animals to relocate them here over time, and they've done the same with the human stock with the 22 genetic experiments. So what is a consciousness renaissance? Not too terribly long ago, we came out of some dark ages and began a renaissance of our own. And it was a consciousness renaissance. It was, of the arts mainly. Well, that is nothing compared to what's in store for us next. Once we have these different energetic pulses occur, those are going to be a catalyst for our consciousness to expand very rapidly. We're going to go from basically a point of ignorance to a point of having full access or almost full access to our higher selves and to our co-creative consciousness. And as we make that transition, we learn to wield that co-creative consciousness over years. It's not going to be like that. The process will be a renaissance. We're going to go from having a different perspective on the world to realizing that we can change the world with consensus. So how are Mecca's people supporting us here on Earth? Well, not only are they reaching out to us as Kari's people are, but they are preparing. They're preparing to come and walk and work among us once we shake off this control system. They see us as their cosmic cousins, and they're ready for a family reunion, but we have to be ready. And when we're ready, we are going to have a number of different human-looking beings coming here, introducing themselves. We'll find out genetically there's very little difference, and we will greet these family members, and they're going to help us out of a very hard time. The 22 genetic experiments are experiments in ascension, the different aspects of ascension. From a cosmic perspective, our local star cluster has been hosting these 22 genetic programs. Outside of our star cluster, there are other programs going on, but these genetic farmer beings did not have access to our local star cluster for quite a while until there was a war that dropped the defenses that were around our star cluster. There was the ancient builder race, a race that has disappeared, developed a defense grid around our local star cluster. And once that was brought down, all of the genetic farmer races rushed in because there were genetics that had been developing for eons that they had not had access to. The only genetic experiments that were going on within the local star cluster were beings inside that local star cluster that were beginning to experiment with genetic engineering and making changes to planets to make them inhabitable, terraforming. What are the different components of this program? Of course, there's a genetic program where they're taking genetic stock from themselves and from different star systems and mixing them with ours in a way that is going to make us better. It makes us a better vehicle for the higher consciousness they're trying to impart onto us. Now, consciousness is another component. They are trying to give us, different belief systems. They've brought us many different belief systems over the eons. And these belief systems were not always to control us, but they were also to cause us to slowly expand our consciousness and have a more spiritual understanding of things. Now, the spiritual component and the consciousness component are obviously related. The one that has not been talked about that much is the cosmic component, this giant clockwork that's occurring. As we're passing through this giant clock, while we're making this journey, these 22 genetic farmer races are busy working on our genetics and our consciousness and spirituality to make us ready. If they did not do this work, as we went through these cycles, we would go through them much slower because we would not, they're giving us a major boost in in genetics, and they're working in concert with the cosmic component. So what happens when ET participants of the experiment incarnate on Earth? Well, these beings, they have to work within cosmic law. In order for some of them to be able to come here and do experiments on us, they will take a part of their non-terrestrial group and have them incarnate as human beings. And in doing so, giving permission for them to be abducted or experimented on or any number of other things. But because of cosmic law, they have to have their memories wiped when they come in. It's just a part of the cosmic law. We've had ETs die on Earth, and depending on where they are in their development, if they're a fourth or a fifth density being, especially a fourth, they can get caught up in our incarnation cycle. As a matter of fact, in the intruder intercepted interrogation program, our perspective was that there was this ET group that was coming in, abducting people at night, and then returning them dead. And how evil is that, right? That's horrible. They're killing people. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's intercept one of these vessels and interrogate them. Well, we did. And guess what we found out? They were there on a rescue mission from their perspective. Thousands of years earlier, one of their craft had crashed, and many of their inhabitants had gotten caught up in our incarnation cycle. And what they perceived they were doing is locating long-lost comrades and rescuing them from this horrible third-density life and putting them back into a body that they had been in before. So from our perspective, it looked like a very evil, heinous thing that they were doing, but from their perspective, they were rescuing long-lost comrades. What is the natural law loophole? Well, as I stated, they incarnate here to prevent violating any type of cosmic law. Now, not all wanderers or starseeds are coming here to be guinea pigs. Most of us have a soul contract, and I think I was talking with Teresa recently. When I check out of this existence, I'm going to want to see the paperwork. I want to see a signature, because I don't know why I would have agreed to this. This is crazy. But supposedly, we agreed to this. I don't know. It could be a psyop, but supposedly we agreed to it. Yeah, I recovered it. So how do they contain the experiment? If they have all these different experiments and all these different experiments, mice, lab mice, roaming the earth, how do they keep these gene pools pure? How do you keep them from interbreeding together unless you want them to? Well, within religions and social norms, you have them program themselves. You create beautiful things like racism. You instill hate and fear of what is different than you so that you will either attack it or flee from it. They have different languages to keep you separated from each other conscious-wise, as well as they'll separate you from different geological locations. And what they want to do, what they've mainly done is they programmed us to, how many of you were younger, you had a parent say, you can't marry outside of your race. That is us maintaining ourselves. We were programmed to maintain ourselves. And we're starting to break a lot of those programs as a society, slowly but surely. Now, these programs are working in concert with each other for the overall goal, but they're also competing with each other. They want to see their genetic line, they want to see their program be the one that comes out on top. Now, a lot of them, it's not an ego thing for them, because they are tied to us karmically. Until they are invested in this program, they have to help us develop physically through genetics, and consciousness, help our consciousness expand, so that when this cosmic component occurs, we are ready to ascend or expand in our consciousness, which will allow them to take the next step. But because they have karmic entanglement with us, they can no longer ascend. They are tied to us in our process. So how does this program develop over time? Well, at first, of course, they're going to be tinkering with our genetics in the background, sending angels down to walk amongst us and give us different ideas about religion or different tools for civilization. But when we get to the point where we're starting to get now, to where we are maintaining, we're beginning to maintain genetics ourselves. We're breaking the genetic codes. Before long, we are going to self-manage. Every civilization out there reaches that point to where they don't have to be tinkered with anymore. They become, I guess, mature, and they begin to tend their own gardens. And that's where we're about to be. The Anshar and the different groups, they can manipulate their DNA, their energetic fields, and that's something that we are all headed towards, as well as becoming a cosmic species, which overtly becoming a cosmic species. Right now, we have a presence in the cosmos that is not exactly a positive one, but that too will change. Now, these upgrades that they give us from time to time they're meant to coincide with this cosmic energy that is increasing. Every time we get to a point in the cycle to where we're about to have these cosmic energies increase, they begin tinkering with our genetics and giving us ideologies that will help our consciousness expand. So what's the recipe for success? How do we achieve a perfect balance right now? I mean, all of us are on that path. That's what we want, but we're in this environment that is so hectic. You know, how do we ground? I think doing what we're doing now, finding tribe or birds of a feather, if you will, this is one of the ways that we're really going to be able to ground ourselves. It's through supporting each other that we're going to be able to, take this horrible density for as long as we have to until we get this mission completed. In order to transition, we also have to start working on the co-creative consciousness, planting seeds, using our skills. There are a lot of very creative people here now, and the creativity that you have access to has a major impact on the co-creative consciousness. Each of you, through making videos, art, music, have a way to contribute to this 100th monkey effect, to where you can cause people to get on the same page. Just like Ross said earlier, delivering the information to 2, 3, 4 people was all it took, because that seed was planted in this mass consciousness, and we've seen how it has grown since then. What are the effects of incarnating on Earth now? Well, there's apparently some sort of a solar sneeze coming. It's very difficult to predict what exactly it's going to be like. We have people, the more nuts and bolts people, that think it's just going to be a major coronal mass ejection that is going to take out electronics either for a little while or permanently, and it's just going to be an inconvenience. Some of them think that it's going to be a kill shot. Everyone's going to be burned up on the earth. Well, they're on both sides, the positive and the negative. There are the more esoteric or spiritual types that believe that this is going to be some sort of an ascension or a shift. but there's very little consensus among us or within the programs. It's a mystery. Now, what has been communicated by Tier Air is that this upgrade will provide more than 100,000 years of evolution in less than 1,000 years. Our society in 1,000 years will make this huge quantum leap. Now, the population has never been larger. It seems that every soul that has ever existed is incarnated right now. And I think that the number of wanderers that have incarnated here since the 80s has become a significant part of the population, in my opinion. So, how do we go from star seeds to star blossoms? That's a term Bridget Nielsen recently coined. It was really apt. Many ET groups are incarnating here to help us in the ascension process. Some of the negative groups are more overtly interfering with us through secret societies, through direct contact with those in the government. The more benevolent ones are going to do so through cosmic law, and they're doing so through incarnating here as well as communicating with us telepathically. And what's occurring is that all of the star seeds that I'm running into they're transitioning into star blossoms. They're all of a sudden, they knew they were different, they knew they had a mission, but now they're finding the mission. They're fine-tuning the missions. And everyone that I've seen here talking about their mission has done so with an extreme amount of excitement. Everyone that is here to do a mission is ready to do that mission right now. And that's why we're coming together like this. We're coming together to organize for that mission. So we're in an evolving experiment. We've always been in it, and the goal of this experiment is ascension. Now, a part of the ascension process and what will lead us to this consciousness renaissance is full disclosure. Now, we are all begging for full disclosure. Hopefully, in the near future, we'll all be marching and demanding full disclosure. But of all the people on earth, we need to realize that it's not going to be a kumbaya moment. Full disclosure is going to be the release of not only the secrets, but the crimes against humanity that were perpetrated to keep the secrets. The things that I've talked about on cosmic disclosure, the galactic slave trade, all of these things are going to be a major shock and trauma to us. Disclosure is going to be traumatic, but all evolution occurs during stress. All evolution. So when we have full disclosure and we do have the trauma that we're going to try to work through, we need to realize that that trauma is actually a gift that's going to help us evolve. An opportunity to navigate the most optimal timeline. As y'all have heard, I heard in the last 6 months, it's been a little bit longer now, that we have a small window of opportunity to be able to attain the most optimal temporal reality. And what has to occur is that all of us have to contribute. We contribute through our skills. We contribute on every level that we can, including mass meditations, which is what we're about to do. But it's really important that we find ways to plant seeds in the mass consciousness over the next 3 years, because that looks like it's going to be the catalyst that, well, us as a mass consciousness, we're going to decide which timeline we're going to experience. And we have a lot of negative groups that are trying to guide us to the wrong temporal reality, and we have a huge responsibility right now. Mike, do you want to talk about the Full Disclosure Project? Mike recently organized I guess it was a protest, or not really a protest, outside of an Air Force base where they were handing out flyers to these people walking inside the Air Force base. And I had no idea this was going on. Sigmund, not too long ago, told me, well, I won't use the language, but to have my people quit harassing his people at an Air Force base, and I denied having any knowledge of it, and he kind of scowled at me like I was a liar. And then I find out months later that someone on my team had been doing it. It was Mike. Which blows me away. Yeah. Mike, he's this very quiet guy, very humble guy, okay? And then he's out handing flyers to Air Force personnel going on the base. I mean, I've had a problem reconciling that in the beginning. He's got a lot of guts.
It's because of my friend over here, Lotus, has been doing it his whole... Or not, where is he? Where's Lotus?
Yeah.
Right there. He's been doing it his whole life, so he encouraged me to do it. But this is something that's really worth emphasizing, because all I did was start a meetup group, and people like Lotus showed up and pushed me to do things. People like Lotus showed up to my meetup group, and that pushed me to be inspired to do things like the protest at Schriever Air Force Base and the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs. We did that a few times. And we're not just giving out flyers, we're giving out DVDs, and I'm getting better and better at making DVDs and putting a lot onto one DVD. So I actually created a few things leading up to this that we can announce right now, I think.
Yeah. How many of y'all are willing to take part in something like that in your community? I thought so. All right.
Okay, so, well, the first thing we're probably going to do is, should we go with the flyer, you think? So we got a flyer here that explains basically some of the simple steps of what you can do to start a group, similar to what I did. And we're also working towards just creating a 501c3 type organization around the Full Disclosure Project, which can help support local chapters of the Full Disclosure Project in some way. And so this flyer explains that a little bit, and it gives a link at the top. The link at the very top is community.fulldisclosureproject.org, which is where you can go right now to begin the discussions, and following after this, discussing how you start a group and what's going on with the Full Disclosure Project. Right now, we really haven't had a resource like that, except for the Facebook pages, but this will be a much more structured, it's not exactly a traditional forum. It's software, it's called Discourse. It's a little bit more like a social network. Some of the better features, works better on mobile devices than a traditional forum, but it does allow for a structured discussion to occur on many topics. We can do that. I also created a website you'll see at the back of the flyer. I couldn't decide if I should call it like Disclosure Institute, Disclosure Academy, just somewhere where I could put like flyers and DVDs for you to learn from and also distribute to others. So if you go to disclosureinstitute.org right now, you can find the flyers that we used for the Schriever protest, and also you'll find a bunch of DVDs that I've given out. You find DVD images, which are the things that you download and then burn onto a blank DVD. And so it's really cheap to buy DVDs right now. DVD-Rs, DVD plus Rs, if you have a DVD burner. And then you can pass out tons of information, great information to people. And it works a little bit better sometimes than just giving people a link. If you have something that you can actually hand to them, it works a lot better.
Yeah, they're passing out flyers with more information on how you can participate. So as we're talking, they should...
One thing I have to say is that the flyer that we're passing out, some people already got it if you got a packet recently in the last couple hours. If you got a packet, you don't need to get one of these flyers. It's already in the packet.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Now, we're really planning on getting organized here soon. We're planning on getting very organized. And we're not going to do protests like the Soros types of protests that we've seen over the last couple of years. It's going to be more like peaceful walks. And we're going to come up with different clever ways of using the different types of press to release this information as well. So definitely we would love to have everyone take part and contribute their skills. Yeah, we're looking very forward to this.
One other thing I want to share is the email address you can now use to contact us is teams@fulldisclosureproject.org.
Well, what do we do after disclosure? You've heard David Wilcock talk about, and we talked about it's not going to be a kumbaya moment. We're going to have people that are going to be so depressed they don't want to get out of bed, take a shower. It's going to be bad. We're going to go through that process too, but we're going to be more prepared. So not only are we going to have to assist our loved ones, but who's made a plan? Have the mental health professionals gotten together to create a response plan for people, for not only the people who have mental issues, but for the regular person who has been taught a dogma or a religion all their life, and they find out now, and we're going to find out too, that we were lied to or we were wrong. Well, actually, we now have professionals from all over the mental health field coming together to do exactly that. Some mental health professionals that don't believe in aliens at all, but it's a good mental exercise for a lot of them. They're coming up with different plans to assist different personality types, people from different religious beliefs, for all over the world. I think it's one of the most important things that no one's ever thought of. You know, why hasn't this been done? Well, one of our team members, Vivian Davis, she has a master's degree in psychology. She's a therapist. She's taken this project to the next level, and she's going to run with it with a few other people. And they're going to do a workshop on Sunday, tomorrow morning. I'm going to be here. I hope you can all be here. If you have a mental health, a background in mental health, or know people in your family who would be interested in this, please grab the information and circulate this website to them, disclosuresupport.org. So anyway, this is a real important project that we're proud of, and we see it growing. It's growing very rapidly right now. Thank you. So, how can you contribute? I'm sure you all have your own little missions, your own little pet projects, but we have a lot of different skills here. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be a musician. We have writers. We have sound engineers, researchers, people that have experience with social media. Everyone can contribute. And right now, Gaia has a lot of positions open. If you could go to the website, look for a position that would match, and go ahead and apply. It would be a lot of people have been hooking up with Gaia and getting positions recently from like Contact in the Desert, and they've gotten a lot of really good people recently. So there's always a way for you to contribute. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. Don't forget to share cosmic co-creation.com with your friends. It's a good program. Gerald O'Donnell put it together. It's to help with learn remote viewing, remote influencing. But when I first started doing it, I started having all kinds of spontaneous out-of-body experiences and very interesting other experiences. So this will help with the consciousness expansion, in my opinion.
Thank you. Give it up for Corey.
This is the house or duplex that we just moved out of. Nobody complaining about my camera work, okay? Alright, walking in the front door. See, I have a security camera installed there. My This door here, I should probably show the camera I'm looking. They still haven't fixed it. This whole plate that was right here was ripped off, and this was ripped off. And there was a crack all down right here and right here where someone tried to strong arm their way in, but they couldn't get in. This is the living room, and this is where my couch sat and where I would come in and sit, and the television would be right there, and you see the high ceilings. And when I was here with my dog, right here is where raw pure air appeared in front of my dog and I when we were sitting here, and it got our attention. And here was the dining room, little kitchen area. Just documenting this as we move out. And back here, down the hallway to the right, was my son's room, where some incidents took place. His bed was right there. I've got photographs right after. My daughter's room. Incidents took place. Bathroom. Typical. And this was the master bedroom. This is where all the funkiness came from. That wall right there is, sometimes the ceiling right up there is right where blue orbs came and went. That was the head of our bed to the foot of our bed. I don't know if this will be helpful to anyone visualizing anything. Now, out here quite a bit happened, especially in the beginning. This is where the crash. Another security camera that I put up because there's some harassment going on around here. But through the tree canopy, through this area right here, make the approach, stop, and hover right out here. And my wife took photos of my bare feet going out when there was no grass here. It was all mud. And bare feet walking out, and then from all the way over here, bare feet walking back with like nothing in between. One of the times, show the house from the back. It's kind of muddy, so I don't want to get around out here too far. There's the video camera. Whoever has been screwing with us was pretty good at figuring out the angles of the cameras. But that's it. Finishing moving out of here. Hopefully we have a whole lot better luck with security. Okay. Door that's mentioned.
the head of the bed. So this is the wall.